G'day, do you own a North American truck in Australia? Where do you get parts from? There's a whole heap of part suppliers around the place in Australia and internationally. Here's how I do it, here's how I purchase parts. This relates to my previous F250 that I own and indeed the current Ram that I have. Now in Australia you can get Ram parts. In fact there are some times I buy parts in Australia. Most of my consumables come from Australia. Filters, you know, air, oil, fuel, stuff like that. Most of that comes from Australia in terms of stuff you put into it, oil itself, grease, stuff like that. I will buy all that in Australia. There's a number of suppliers there. One of the easiest ones for you, no matter where you are in Australia, is Cummins directly. Cummins should have most of the filters that you need in terms of air and oil and fuel and all that sort of thing. That shouldn't be too much of a problem for you. You should be able to get all them from Cummins directly. And the oil itself. Now with oil, you can go with anyone that you want to in terms of making sure that it meets the specifications. I've used some different oils over time. Just make sure that it fits your specification, whether it's a CI, a CJ or CK spec oil. It'll depend on what model vehicle you are. I've got a 3rd gen with the 5.9 common rail, so my requirement for oil is definitely less than some of you that have the current generation in the diesel. Having said that, I found the Cummins Valvoline oil Premium Blue is a fantastic oil. I buy it in 200 litre drums and I use it in every diesel that I have. I've got a few farm utes, I've got our Land Cruiser and the Ram tractors. That oil is such a high grade that it meets all the specifications for all the vehicles that I have, and it's fully synthetic. And as best as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that that is the only fully synthetic diesel oil in Australia at this time. That may have changed. The last time I looked into that was about a year ago, but it was the only option I had for a fully synthetic. It's 15 weight 40, meets Cummins specifications, and I've bought it in 200 litre drums, and I've seen people who have bought it in 20 litre drums, and they've shown me their pricing, which is not, I mean, it's cheaper the more you get, but the pricing they last showed me was actually very, very competitive. So much so that I would say that if you can get a reasonable price on it, it's well comparable, if not cheaper, than most oils that you will get from your local parts supplier, whether it be Repco or Super Cheap Auto or Burson's or Auto Pro or whoever you might be buying oil from. I've actually found it very price competitive, which is extraordinary to me given the quality of the oil, the rating of the oil, and that it's fully synthetic. So oils and filters I buy in Australia. Cummins is nice and easy because they're all around Australia, even in regional areas. So you shouldn't be too far away from being able to pick a filter up from them. They'll be Fleet Guard products. If you want an alternative, there's other online retailers that will provide it to you as well. Filter Discounters is someone that I've used. They're based in Western Australia, and I'm on the wrong side of the country to them. But even that, I found them very good because they'll ship to me. I found their pricing very competitive and their shipping competitive. Having said that, every time I've ordered from them, I've ordered a bulk lot of filters to cover everything in my fleet, the skid steer tractors and stuff like that. So obviously the more you order in larger lots, the overall price per filter goes down in terms of freight costs, so that it can be cost competitive there. But the one thing I like about that is it allows you to choose your filter. They cover most brands like Donaldson, Baldwin, Fleet Guard obviously, as well as other filter manufacturers that are more generic like Sakura or Westfield or whatever. So you have a few options there, and I don't find that a bad thing because, for example, in my Ram, I want to run the most stringent micron fuel filter that I can, and that's not made by Fleet Guard. That's made by Baldwin. So in my Ram, I run Baldwin fuel filters because they have a more stringent micron rating than the Fleet Guard does, and that's something that I want in filtering my fuel. So by giving you that choice, you can get into the specifications of the filter and you can buy the one that's right for you. And I don't want to get into an argument about which filter is best because a lot of people get very animated about that. I have found, particularly when I say I run a Baldwin fuel filter, what do you run a Baldwin fuel filter for? Cummins own Fleet Guard, and Fleet Guard would know the best, and that's fine if that's your opinion. go with whatever you want. But that's an advantage if you don't necessarily want to run Fleetguard by going to somebody who offers a broader suite of filter options. Then you can pick and choose what's right for you when you're buying filters from them. So there's a few options there. Now, in terms of parts, if something breaks, what do? The part might be on the shelf here, and it's going to depend a lot of this on how quickly you need it fixed, because you've got people like Trucks and Toys and SCD and other specialty RAM and F250 and such manufacturers like Harrison F Trucks or whoever. You will have some of these people in Australia that you can go to, and hopefully they have the part on the shelf for you. Now, what you're doing there is you're actually going to probably pay a premium, which in my opinion is well warranted, because they have to stock it. There's obviously capital tied up in that part on the shelf. They've got to bring it in and then they've got to sell it to you. All of that adds cost, so you will pay a premium for that most of the time. That's perfectly fine. You're paying for the luxury of having the part available right now and not having to wait. So if you're in a hurry, need a part real fast, got to get on the road today, there are people in Australia that you can look for. And the communities in these trucks, whether it be Silverado or F250 or RAM or whatever, online, which has mostly moved to social media platforms now in Australia, are very good. And they're very quick to engage and help, I've found. And watching some of the interactions on these platforms, it makes the community, if you like, around owning these sorts of trucks, a more pleasant place to be. So in Australia, there are some options too. It's going to depend on the make of the vehicle, because some people, if you go to Harrison F Trucks and you ask them for, a sway bar end link for a 2007 Ram, they probably won't have it because that's not the vehicle that they're specialising in. But there are providers in Australia where you can go and get the parts you need for your F250, Ram, Silverado, etc. Now, if you've got the luxury of time, if you're doing a preemptive strike, if you're planning to get some parts to keep in reserve, if you are, you've got a break, it's not a bad break, you can live with it, or a potential fatigue point that you know needs to be replaced, or you just park the car up for a week and you can wait, then you can look at online ordering, and that's where your options really start to open up. I don't use one particular platform. If there was one that I use the most, it's rockauto.com, and I've done a specific review if you're interested in Rock Auto and Rock Auto in Australia, ordering from them in Australia. Check out my other video on a specific review of rockauto.com. Rockauto.com are very convenient. Their website's pretty easy to navigate. It's not the most modern thing in the world, but it works. You should be able to find the parts you need. I busted a sway bar end link bush last week, and I'm coming up for roadworthy, and it's just chewed it out, so I wanted to get a new bush. They're only new sway bar end links. I replaced them not that long ago. Evidently, when I put them on, I over-tightened them because evidently I wasn't paying attention that day, and I chewed out one of the bushes. So I ordered the parts online. I needed a couple of other things. They came in yesterday, and I ordered them on the Sunday night, and I had them on the Friday. So, and in my experience, that's generally about right. I've ordered parts before from rockauto.com on the Monday, and they've arrived on the Friday. That's pretty fast. Like if I order stuff from Perth or South Australia, being in New South Wales, that's generally how long those parts will take, or whatever it is that I'm ordering. That's generally how long it'll take to get to me. So a 5-day turnaround, and that's not using expedited shipping. There is another shipping option you can use with rockauto.com for expedited shipping. I've never used that option because 5 days is sufficient for me. And I had the parts, and it was cheap. The shipping was about $15 Australian for the parts, and I got a few bits and pieces and then my bushings. So it wasn't a heavy parcel, but $15, it had cost me that on a prepaid satchel to send something to South Australia, pretty much anything. So that's cheap shipping, it's fast, it's reliable, and really makes the experience of owning one of these trucks a lot better. The downside is that it becomes a little bit more difficult on big parts. If you want to order something large, I haven't found rockauto.com very competitive on large parts, like things that would be really large. I ordered a pair of fenders from the US just recently, and rockauto.com's they could provide it to me. It was a circa $100 part for each fender or something like that. It might have been $200, I can't remember. But it wasn't an expensive part necessarily to order really for each individual fender, but the shipping was $2,000 Australian. $2,000 Australian. So obviously I didn't do that. I actually ended up getting them from an online auction site. In this case, I think it was eBay, and I ordered it from them, and it was $1,000 all up. So that's still expensive for two fenders, but it was cheaper than the price I got quoted in Australia by a fairly considerable margin. So I bought my fenders from there. So it's horses for courses. I haven't found Rock Auto great for really, really big stuff. Like with this conversion I'm doing, I also need a grill and a grill bracket. Again, it wasn't my cheapest option to go through rockauto.com. So and they've only got a generic aftermarket supply anyway. So I've gone to a third-party site and ordered from them directly. Now I did have to do my injectors at one point for the Ram, and when I came time to do that, I didn't actually use Rock Auto. I didn't like the options that they'd given me, and I wanted genuine new Bosch injectors, and I wanted new connector tubes and new lines. And when I came around to do that job, I chose to use Injectors Direct. Injectors Direct I found fine. They got the stuff here about 4 or 5 days. Again, it was similar to Rock Auto. It was certainly within 5 business days they arrived. And I changed the parts out, they were fine, repackaged the old injectors, sent them back. I think it cost me about $100 or something to get them back over there. It might have been a bit more than that, but anyway, sent them back, got my refund, everything worked fine, even with an international transaction. And I found that very good, and their pricing was as good as I could find anywhere on the internet, and was certainly running with the brands that I didn't want to use on rockauto.com. So Injectors Direct for me was good in that circumstance. I found that very, very good. So it is horses for courses. I've also used Amazon.com for parts. Amazon.com I found particularly good if you're a Prime member, and over whatever it is, $49 I think, international shipping is free. And I found that really, really good for ordering specialty tools to work on these things. I've got a ball joint removal kit from them and some other bits and pieces, and I found them really good for specialty tools that might be available in Australia, but at 4, 5, 6 or more times the cost. The ball joint removal kit I got, I think, was about 1/7 of the price I got quoted locally. So with the brands that you want to buy from, I found that very, very good. So I've used them as well. Mopar Parts Online is also a good resource to use, certainly for shopping parts against other online resellers, might be Injectors Direct or Rock Auto or whatever. They're worthwhile having a look at. They're a firm that will ship internationally, so they're worth checking out as well. And then as well, things like eBay can also be worthwhile as well. I have bought a couple things, not many, but I have bought a couple things from eBay as well for the Ram. You just got to be careful with eBay. Is often they'll part the proof is in the pudding. It might look very cheap, but when you dig into it, it's a no-name generic part for something that you don't want a no-name generic part. I've seen things like Moog tie rod ends, and then when you click on the link, get into the link, it actually says that it's made by some unknown Asian name, manufactured in China, and it's not actually a Moog part. So you do want to check the firing pin with that. Same thing with Bosch injectors. When I was looking before I ordered my injectors from Injectors Direct, I did check out eBay, and they had a lot of Bosch injectors with the part number that I wanted, but then when you drilled into the description, it was a Chinese manufacturer, Chinese name part. It wasn't a Bosch injector, and I wasn't willing to risk it for, and the discount just wasn't enough to risk it. Not on an engine that's worth that much to save something like $500 to even $1,000 on a part on a set of 6 injectors, and I don't think it was that much. I think it was probably $500-600 to save that sort of money on an engine that's worth far more than that to me. If I have to rebuild it because of a dodgy injector, it's just not worth the risk. So the speed of international shipping really transforms the ownership of this. When I owned an F250 back in the day, your parts were a lot less available. What I used to do to get parts to Australia was I had a buddy of mine who also had an F250. He was Canadian, and he used to get his parts shipped out from a dealer that he knew quite well in Canada, and I used to procure parts that way. And I found that the most cost-effective way of doing it. But nowadays, with the interwebs, you've got a lot more options available to you, and they're good. And you know, I was very, very impressed with the Rock Auto experience last week. As I said, I need some bushing done, and I need it quickly. I knew I'd get it quickly. Got it in 5 days, but the shipping for $15, you know, that's cheap, and what I'd pay in Australia anyway. So there are lots of options for you. You want to check them all out. There's also, you know, things like thoroughbred diesel and such. Some of these online specialty houses, particularly regarding performance parts, will ship internationally, and they're worth a look. I have had a look at a number of their sites, particularly regarding things like aftermarket pre-filters and things. I'm not really pushing the most out of my RAM. I'm not looking to chip it. I'm not looking to tune it right up. I just want to, it's got all the power I need. It's got all the towing ability I need. The fuel economy is quite good. So I'm just trying to maintain it. That's really my priority at this point. So it depends on what you're looking, but some of those online resellers are very good as well. But the good news is you've got lots of options. You've got lots of options, and through them, you should be able to get the parts that you require. If you want something big, you know, you want to bring a canopy in or something. I do know a few people, I know one actually, I better not say a few, but I know one person who's imported the canopy direct. I did look at bringing in a flat top, a semi-rigid flat top tonneau cover for my Ram, and the shipping wasn't that bad. In terms of the overall cost, I thought was okay. I didn't go with it. I found a second-hand canopy, and that's what I fitted. But I do know someone who imported a canopy. They did find it a little difficult, and he suspects that the shipper lost a lot of money on getting it to him. But on those big bulky items, what you really want to do is find a container. What I did years ago with my F is I wanted to get a set of rims in here at one point, and I found a fellow who imported parts for Mustangs. He was located in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and he was bringing containers in quite frequently, and I arranged to ship it to him, and then he containerized it and brought it in for me, and his container shipping really wasn't very much compared to the price of those rims, and it all worked out just fine. So there are some options. There's also online people that will handle large shipping items, and you'll just arrange shipping in the continental US. So you can have a look at that as well. That's particularly, you know, potentially useful when either Amazon won't sell you a part, or there's a manufacturer in the US making a large item that you can't get. And you can look at, you know, on small stuff, you might be able to even look at things like Ship-it-to, and you can get a quote from them to bring it into the country. Alternatively, just go to a importer, a large importer in Australia, and get them to do it. You might have to wait for it. Hopefully they work out a price that is acceptable to you and do it that way. But the good news is that parts, you've got lots of different options. If you need it quickly in Australia, you can find it usually. If it is something that you can wait a week and take the cheaper pricing, that's fine. And sometimes that's worth doing. When I did my shocks, I did a review of the Bilstein 5100s, which I fitted to these when I did some suspension work on it. When I brought them in, the domestic price was about $2,000 to get all 4 shocks. I literally had them landed at my door for $500. So for a quarter of the price, I had to wait 5 days. Money, you know, time well spent in waiting, I suppose. But it depends on your requirements. It is certainly good, and that's why I do, from time to time, flick my business to domestic suppliers, because I might need them one day, and if we all use international shipping and the domestic people aren't there anymore, then it can make a bit of a problem. But you know, we've all got to live with the cost of running these things as well. So sometimes it is that you just can't buy everything domestically because it'd send you broke. Certainly, you know, there's some things on this truck I just wouldn't have done if I had to pay the domestic price for them. So I hope that's useful for you. There's some different options for you. Mopar parts online, Injectors Direct, Amazon, eBay, Rock Auto. These are all firms that I've used. I've also used Glow Shift parts. I found them quite good. Glow Shift is in the aftermarket space, you know, similar to someone like Thoroughbred Diesel. Glow Shift have been good. I've ordered a couple of things from them and they've been really good, including on their backup. So you can use these aftermarket parts retailers as well. You just got to evaluate the cost and whether that's worthwhile to you. So in closing, lots of options for you. I hope this was useful for you, and I hope it makes the experience of owning your North American truck in Australia a lot better. Thanks for watching.